September 12, 1944. 8,000 feet over the jungles of Peleliu, an F-6F Hellcat drifted alone, its automatic camera clicking like a metronome. Major Robert Cowboy Stout expected a quiet recon run photograph of an abandoned airfield, returned to USS Hornet, and let someone else worry about whatever was down there. But then he looked again. The airfield wasn't dead. It was alive, too alive. Row after row of Mitsubishi Zeros and Nakajima bombers crowded the tarmac, wingtip to wingtip, like sharks gathering before a kill. Fuel drums were stacked in neat rows. Ground crews sprinted between aircraft. These planes weren't hiding, they were preparing, and Stout realized something terrifying. In just 3 days, 28,000 Marines would hit the beaches of Peleliu. Those Japanese aircraft were positioned to tear the invasion fleet apart before the first Higgins boat touched sand. One man, one Hellcat, 40 enemy aircraft ready to launch. What Stout decided next shouldn't have been possible. And for decades, the Navy never told the full story. A shocking detail later found in the mission reports changes everything. Stout's assignment that morning was routine, almost insultingly simple, for a man who'd flown through storms, fought Zeros, and survived 50-plus missions. Intelligence briefings had insisted the northern airfield on Peleliu was crippled from earlier raids. A few wrecks, maybe a stray truck, nothing more. He was there to take pictures, not change history. But the first glimpse told him the briefings were dead wrong. What lay below him wasn't an abandoned strip, it was a fully armed Hornet nest. At least 40 Japanese aircraft sat packed together so tightly their wing edges nearly touched. Zeros gleamed in the sun. Nakajima bombers crouched like vultures waiting for a signal. Fuel drums ringed the edges in tall, careless stacks. Mechanics ran between aircraft, topping off tanks, checking fuses, loading ordnance. They were preparing for a mass strike. A textbook pre-landing blow meant ripping the heart out of the invasion fleet. Stout knew the doctrine. Japanese commanders favored dense, overwhelming attacks right before an amphibious landing hit the transports while they were helpless, scatter the troop waves, turn the beaches into killing grounds. And with 28,000 Marines already steaming toward Peleliu, the timing was perfect. But there was something else that made Stout's stomach tighten. The Japanese had made a mistake. A big one. In their rush to prepare for the strike, they jammed their aircraft into the open with fuel drums sitting practically against the wings. No spacing, no revetments, no protection. One spark would turn the entire field into a rolling inferno. Stout glanced at his ammo count. 6 Browning 50s, 2,400 rounds, only 12 seconds of fire. 12 seconds to stop a massacre. Or 12 seconds to get himself killed. The thought hit him once. Hard report back, or act now. And that's when he made the decision that would define the invasion. Stout pushed the throttle forward, and the Hellcat responded with a deep, rising growl. He wasn't supposed to attack. He wasn't supposed to make decisions like this. But he'd seen what Japanese air power did to Marines trapped in landing craft. Tarawa had seared that into him forever. He wasn't going to watch it happen again. His plan was brutally simple. Come in low, come in fast, and hit the fuel. He didn't need to destroy 40 aircraft. He just needed to start the fire. At 2,000 feet, he leveled off, rammed the throttle to the firewall, and dropped to treetop height. The Hellcat knifed through open jungle gaps at nearly 400 miles an hour. Branches blurred beneath him, sunlight strobed through leaves like a muzzle flash. By the time the airfield appeared ahead, he was almost on top of it. Japanese ground crews froze. A few stared upward, confused. Some doves for cover. Not one of them made it to an anti-aircraft gun in time. Stout lined up on the northern row and squeezed the trigger. 6 Browning 50s answered at once, their combined thunder drowning everything. Tracer lines stitched across the tarmac, ripping through thin aluminum, shredding wings, puncturing fuel tanks. A Zero erupted in sparks. Stout shifted his aim just a hair and walked the tracers into the fuel drums stacked between 2 bombers. The air instantly turned white. Then the world exploded. Fuel drums vaporized in a rising column of flame. A bomber's fuselage vanished in the first fireball. Shockwaves slammed Stout's canopy as he yanked the Hellcat upward. Behind him, the inferno spread with frightening speed, one burning aircraft igniting another, each blast feeding the next like falling dominoes. Half the airfield was already furnace. But in the southern row, 20 aircraft remained, untouched. Stout knew exactly what that meant. The next run would be a death sentence. Stout climbed hard, banking wide, trying to buy a few seconds to think. The first run had worked better than he ever imagined too well. The northern row was gone, flames rolling across the tarmac like a living creature. But the southern cluster, those bombers were still intact, still fueled, still armed. And now every gunner on the island was awake. A rational pilot would have left. A disciplined pilot would have left. But the Marines steaming toward Peleliu had no idea 40 aircraft were supposed to hit them in 3 days. Stout wasn't leaving 20 killers sitting there, ready to launch as soon as the smoke cleared. He rolled the Hellcat inverted and dove. This time the sky lit up instantly. Tracers tore upward like reshot needles. 20-millimeter bursts thumped around him, each one capable of ripping his engine to clean off the mounts. The Hellcat shuddered, metal screeching. Somewhere behind him. Warning lights blinked. Hydraulics groaned. He didn't level out. He didn't flinch. He jinked left, then right, constantly shifting angles, denying the gunners a steady line. Every instinct screamed to pull away, but he kept pushing. He came in from a new angle, low, diagonal, and unpredictable, and it paid off. His remaining ammunition hammered into the southern bombers, tearing through control surfaces, rupturing tanks, punching deep into fuselages. Then Stout saw its fuel truck parked between 2 planes. He didn't hesitate. He walked the tracers toward it. The truck detonated like a buried mine. A fireball rolled outward, flipping a bomber onto its back. Ammunition crates beside it began cooking off rapid flashes, concussive thumps. Bomb racks ignited, the explosions tearing aircraft apart from the inside. His guns went silently, empty. Now he was flying a damaged, slowing target over the most alert air defense grid on Peleliu. Something leaked behind him, oil, maybe hydraulic fluid streaming into a thin smoke trail. The tail section was half shredded. The controls felt heavy. Each movement took effort. But below him, the entire airfield was burning. Everything was unraveling exactly as he'd hoped, and exactly as the Japanese had never expected. Stout pointed at the wounded Hellcat toward the sea, climbing just enough to clear the jungle canopy. The adrenaline was gone now, replaced by a cold awareness of every strange vibration and every warning light blinking across the panel. Oil pressure was dropping, hydraulics were bleeding out. The controls felt heavy, sluggish, almost stubborn. He didn't know if the landing gear would extend, and he didn't dare cycle it yet. One failure now meant ditching in the open Pacific, and with his tail shredded, he doubted the Hellcat would survive the impact. The flight back to USS Hornet fell longer than the entire attack. Stout radioed ahead, breaking recon silence. Aircraft damaged, gear questionable, request priority landing. Deck officers looked up to see a Hellcat limping toward them, trailing smoke. The carrier turned into a wind. Deck cleared. Arresting wires reset. Stout dropped the landing gear, one wheel locked, the other sagged halfway. No time to troubleshoot. He came in hot, caught the second wire hard enough to make metal groan across the deck. The Hellcat slammed down with a force that made crewmen flinch. Flames still scorched the paint. Holes peppered the fuselage. The tail looked like it had been chewed apart. Officers rushed forward, not to congratulate him but to demand answers. Why did a recon pilot return with combat damage? Why had he broken the radio procedure? What situation over Peleliu required him to risk losing the aircraft? Stout's answer was almost casual. The airfield wasn't abandoned. They were prepping on strike. I destroyed it. There was a long, stunned silence. How many aircraft? Someone finally asked. 40, Stout said. They almost laughed until the reconnaissance photos arrived the next morning. The entire airfield was a blackened graveyard. 40 burned aircraft, fuel dumps vaporized, structures flattened by explosions. And that's when the Navy understood what they nearly missed. In the days that followed, the Marines stormed Peleliu's beaches under a brutal sun and into some of the hardest fighting of the Pacific War. Coral ridges turned into fortresses, caves became slaughterhouses. The island cost nearly 2,000 American lives. But what the Marines never knew then, not for years, was how close they came to facing something worse. 40 Japanese aircraft, fully armed, fully fueled, ready to hit them in the moment of maximum vulnerability, gone in 8 minutes, because one pilot refused to follow the script. Stout didn't think of himself as a hero. He told his family he just saw planes that needed destroying. He kept his Navy Cross in a drawer. But decades later, when historians cross-checked the mission reports, the aerial photos, and the Japanese records, the truth became impossible to ignore. No single pilot in World War II destroyed as many enemy aircraft in one mission. No single unsanctioned strike saved more lives in a shorter span of time. Modern fighter schools still teach what Stout demonstrated that morning: initiative over obedience, intent over procedure, commanders write orders. But the person staring down the threat, the one who sees it with their own eyes, sometimes has the clearest judgment of all. 8 minutes, one Hellcat. One decision made alone above a jungle runway, and an invasion saved. And the next time you wonder whether doing exactly what you're told is always the right call, remember Cowboy Stout circling above Peleliu, choosing the mission over the rules and trusting himself when it mattered most.